Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place that is dedicated to making sure you've always got something to see and do in the sim as we check out the coolest, most interesting, and best looking places on the planet. So today we are in Norway, and no, not the fjords. Well, not those fjords at least. They're definitely cool to look at, but I'm going to guess that 99% of you, if not 100% of you, have probably already flown out there, and probably more than a few times. Instead, we are taking off just east of the capital city of Oslo, which of course we will check out on our way out west across a few beautiful little towns and into the mountains for a landing at the town of Notodden, which is down in a beautiful valley next to a big lake. It's going to be wonderful. And though the scenery out here is pretty good in its own right, what makes this flight extra special is that once again, we've got a member on this channel who sent me this specific flight plan and all kinds of cool details about the area because he actually lives out here. And I'll tell you more about him once we get going because there's a neat little story with all that stuff too. But let's go ahead and get in and get started. You probably noticed we're in the rocket again. The last time we flew the JSX-2 was, let's see, out on our West Virginia trip, I believe. And this time it's more out of necessity than preference, because I was having one heck of a problem with frame rates out here. I think the most recent world update added a lot of definition and detail to the stuff down on the ground. And so I went through lots and lots of planes because I don't like turning the graphics down too low. I completely turned off the windshield effects because that's not that big of a deal. But I had to bring the terrain level of detail down to 200, which is my absolute floor, and the object level of detail down to 100, which is also my floor. And we're still going to get a little bit of stuttering out over the city. Some of the simpler prop planes worked okay, but we also need to go pretty fast for certain stretches out here. So this was the easiest on performance and the fastest that I could get, and I don't mind flying it because obviously the field of view is just incredible in this plane. So I think it'll do just fine for what we're doing it here. One thing I want to mention, a little hack that we're going to have to do with the weather. I cheated a little bit on this because if you've ever flown up in the northern latitudes during these winter months, you know the sun does not get very high up in the sky. So let me show you the settings that I've got. If we made it the current date, look how low that is. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit too dark for doing a lot of spotting of stuff down on the ground. So I brought it back just a couple of months to give us a little bit more daylight. But I also wanted to keep some snow on the ground because there really is snow on the ground up here right now. So I added some snow, about 6 inches of snow, and then of course I had to bring the temperature down a little bit. And I completely removed the wind layer because this thing is so light that even if we aren't having frame rate issues, it'll look like that because it shudders so much with any kind of wind. So that's that, just a little heads up there. Alright, I think I've got everything set up here just fine, so let's go ahead and get the parking brake off. The runway is right in front of us, so we'll be up in the air in no time. And as always, I will have this exact flight plan linked in the video description if you decide you want to take this flight for yourself, along with several freeware add-ons that we've got installed. One of them is for this airport. And I'll apologize for the very loud ground noise in this plane, which is probably pretty accurate because this thing is just a flimsy little shell of a plane. But that will quiet down once we get up in the air. We will be flying this on autopilot. It's about 142 miles in total. Probably be up in the air 30-40 minutes altogether. And a good starting altitude until you get out well past Oslo is about 2,000 feet. But we're going to need to get up to about 5,500 to clear the tallest mountains. Alright, landing lights on, 1 notch of flaps. Let's go ahead and set our initial cruise altitude to 2,000. Get that dial down. Alright, we got our CDIs good. Everything else looks good. Let's do this. Once we get up in the air and get stabilized, I'm going to pull the throttle back a good bit because we don't want to be just ripping across the city. There's a lot of stuff to try to spot down there. This airport we're leaving from is called Kjeller Air Base, Echo November Kilo Juliet. And again, there's a freeware add-on for this, which makes it look better. Not superb, because it's not like one of the high-end payware. Alright, gears up. Flaps up. And go ahead and get the autopilot on. We'll head up at 500 feet a minute. And this airport was taken over by the Luftwaffe during World War II. They occupied it from 1940 all the way up until the liberation in 45. You can see we're getting a little bit of stuttering down there. We're just going to have to contend with that. And directly in front of us is the Glomma River, which is the longest in all of Norway. We won't really get a good view of it here because we're about to turn right. But there's another little freeware add-on that adds some beautiful looking bridges right over here. If you want to fly down there and check those out. On my first flight, I flew a little bit further from the airport. We'll see if we can spot them as we turn here. So that's the river running down there. And that thing is 386 miles long, longest one in Norway. Yeah, we really can't see them from here, but they look great up close. And as we turn right here, we're going to see the Marikollen Ski Center. They've got 4 slopes on that one. It was opened in 1959, and it's going to be, I think, the smallest of several ski complexes that we're going to see out here. All right, let's pull the throttle back, because we're almost at our cruise altitude. Oh, I set it for 3,000. Let's pull that back down. Get back down to 2,000. And there's the ski slopes right there. I'm going to try not to turn my head too much until we get past the city, because we're just going to have to deal with that stuttering. But the detailing on the trees definitely looks good. If there was no snow on the ground with the world update, the detailing on the ground is very good. The price you're going to pay for that, though, is some frame rate issues out here. And I have a pretty stout computer, so I usually don't have this problem. All right, in just a second, we're going to turn again and spot the Haukåsen radar dome, which is used for monitoring air traffic at Gardermoen, which is the main commercial airport about 15 miles north of where we are now. And it's also an add-on just for that little radar dome, and it's going to look great. It's one of those geodesic domes. And apparently the site is a big hotspot among geocachers. Here it is right over here. We're going to see it right out of our left-hand window once we come around. There's a big mine there that's all snowed over. But I read that if you get too close to that, the radiation from it will render your GPS systems useless, although I think we'll be okay in here. And I've never done any geocaching. I had some friends that were really into that, but I've never done it. We've flown over a few geocaching spots. In fact, back in South Africa, that little Rocket Road shack that was down there by the water is a geocaching spot. Alright, as soon as we get over this is the city of Oslo up here. And like most cities, except Sao Paulo, if you saw that flight, everything's going to be jammed together. So I'll tell you about a few landmarks we'll try to spot before we get up there so we can concentrate on trying to find them. Let's look at this radar dome. Look at that thing. Real gem, isn't it? That looks like it might be another ski slope out there. A lot of ski jumping out here. It's a pretty big deal out here. And there's a huge ski jumping place up here on the northwest of town. That might be it sticking up out there. But we're not going to fly out that direction, so we won't get a good look at it. Alright, the first thing we're going to try to see on our left is Notodden Arena. And forgive me if I'm butchering all these words. They're very hard to pronounce. And that was opened pretty recently in 2017 and is currently the home stadium for the Vålerenga Football Club. It's going to be down on our left. And a lot of these buildings have white tops on them, so they're going to be a little bit tough to spot with the snow, but we had to try to keep it as close to lifelike as we could. And once we pass this stadium, if we look down along the water, we should be able to see the new Oslo Opera House, which was opened in 2007, so I guess it's not really new anymore. There's the stadium right there. See that? And the way we'll try to spot the Opera House is that just inland from that is their big central train station, and then a little further inland from that, which I think is right here, is a place called the Spectrum Arena. So the train station should be like right here, and the Opera House is going to be right down in here. And you can see they got a few ships parked in there, and they got a big cruise ship over here, which we'll see as we come around. I think that's it right there, as a matter of fact. Yeah, there's where the Opera House would be, right down in this area here, and because it's got a big white roof on it, I don't think we're going to be able to see much of it. And this two-towered thing is their town hall for Oslo. And their parliament building is down in here somewhere, but it looks a lot like the rest of the building, so it's kind of hard to spot. And there's a big fort right down here called Akershus Fortress, which looks beautiful on the satellite map, but the walls are very low, so we can't really see much of it from here either, but I'll show that to you at the end. And that place was built around 1290 and was besieged unsuccessfully, I should add, no less than 5 times over the next 300 years. And it's where the Prime Minister is residing, at least temporarily. There's their royal palace right there. And off to the right down here is a place called Frogner Park, which I hope we didn't go over it already. I don't think we did. Nope, it's right down here. And they've got a huge statuary in there, which is the biggest in the world, that contains only the artwork of just one guy. I wrote his name down somewhere, but I'd have to scroll back through my notes to find it. And this little peninsula out here has 3 big ship museums. One of them has 3 Viking burial ships in it, and one of them is the biggest they've ever found. And then down here they have a museum with an old Arctic exploration ship from the 1800s, and the museum for the Kon-Tiki. The original Kon-Tiki is inside of there. And if you don't know what that is, you should check it out. Pretty cool. I had to do a book report on that when I was younger, so I know all about the Kon-Tiki. And this big white thing up here is called the Telenor Arena, and that was built in 2009 and has a capacity of around 25,000. But I don't think any professional sports teams are playing in there. On the internet they said it was a multi-purpose facility. But that looks good. And this is the Oslo Fjord. Take it all in. This is the only one we're going to see on this trip. And we're going to have to peel off to the right here in just a bit, but I want to tell you about a location about 15 miles directly south, right in the middle of the fjord. On a little island, there's a place called Oscarsborg Fortress. And the structure you can still see today, which I'll show you on the satellite map at the end, was built in the mid-1800s, but the site has held several naval defenses since 1644. And the current fortress has earned a place in the hearts of the locals for sinking the German heavy cruiser, the Blöcher, I think that's how you say that, during the invasion of Norway in 1940, allowing precious time for the monarchy to flee Oslo and the Norwegian gold reserves to be moved safely to a different location. And the incredible irony of all that is that the fortress sank the Nazi ship with 3 giant 11-inch naval guns that were built by the Germans, by the Krupp Company. And what the Germans were not aware of, however, was 3 underwater torpedo tunnels that could fire 6 torpedoes at once, which was part of the onslaught that sank that thing. Man, probably one of the most awesome things I've ever heard of in my whole life. And they shoot them out from below the waterline. It's pretty cool. I read all about that. Alright, as we head over to our next spot, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our member who sent me all this information, because his interests are pretty well aligned with anyone else who likes what we do around here. And whenever I get a new subscriber, that at least one that has a public profile, if they have their own channel, I always like to check it out, just because I like to know what you guys are up to, just as much as I like you knowing what I'm up to. Well, a couple months ago, someone with the handle ToB Creations, like ToB, but I think you would just say it ToB Creations, joined us, and when I checked out his channel, I found what must be several dozen absolutely stunning drone flight videos over different sites in Norway, some of which we're flying over today. And the scenery alone is worth checking out. It's truly a work of art. He did a great job with it, but he also has some historical context for a few of the sites, and you know I like that. So I'll add a link to his channel in the description for anyone who's interested. And on that note, this is now the 4th flight we've taken, which was almost completely orchestrated by one of our members who's from the area that we're flying over. And if you saw some of our earliest flights, you'll recall that that's kind of been my dream from the very beginning. I'd love to get to the point where every one of these can be supplemented by information from locals who know these spots way better than I ever will. So, as always, there's an open invitation to tell me where you are or where you're from. Give me a few spots I should check out with a test flight. And then I'll let you know if I think it'll be good enough for the full treatment. And if it is, you can just go nuts and tell me everything you know about the area. There is no amount of info that would be too much for me. I could and would do this stuff all day. Heck, I already do it all night. And I love every second of it. Alright, in just a moment we'll see the city of Drammen down to our left. Right, opening up to the waterways down here. Which is the 2nd most populated in eastern Norway after Oslo. And though it just celebrated its bicentennial, the city did, in 2011, there's been stuff going on down there for quite a while. In the middle of a public park down there, you can find a big flat piece of exposed rock surrounded by a simple little iron fence. It actually looks like it's in somebody's backyard. And on that rock, you can find rock carvings believed to be roughly 7,000 years old. You should really check that out. Just Google Drammen rock carvings. They found them in several different locations around town. But by the 1300s, this area and its seaports had become a central hub of the timber trade with Denmark and the Netherlands, which slowly evolved into a paper and pulp industry by the 1800s. And today it's Norway's largest port for automobile importing, which with less snow you could probably see all the cars that are parked along the coast. And on this little island up here, we'll see if we can spot any out here. Alright, now that we're getting away from the city, the stuttering and frame rate issues should steadily improve, so that may be, the worst of that may be behind us now. And if you want to completely install the most recent world update, it may reduce again the resolution and the finer details on the ground, but it will not remove any of the points of interest, so those will still be in here if you're also struggling with frame rate issues. Alright, this whole area right here on the satellite map is nothing but parked cars, and then this whole thing up here is also a huge car lot. And it doesn't look like we can spot any of them from up here, but you know how cars down in ports usually look? Probably flat, so we're probably just as well seeing snow. But you can definitely see them from way up in the air. We'll check that out later. Alright, we're going to turn right here and follow the Drammen River, the 5th longest in Norway, until we reach the small town of Hokksund. And one of the add-ons that I've linked is for the Hokksund airfield, which look really neat in the thumbnails. It's freeware. But it's mostly going to be obscured by the snow on this flight. But I'll show you where it is. It's got a grass strip of about 2,200 feet. And it's going to be right next to the main drag that runs through town. We got a little bridge down there by the water. It looks great. That's a wonderful treat. I think there's a couple more little bridges up here too. Yeah, if I turn my head too fast, it's still just a touch of stuttering. Oh, what's that? Looks like we may have another ski slope up there. I missed that one, if that's what it is. Yeah, if you look off in the distance here, you can see the effect of turning that train level of detail as far down as we had to do that. And there's another huge ski slope out there. We're going to fly directly over that one. So we're going to come around the town here, come down that way, and then come out that way. Cruise over the hometown of our member who sent all this stuff to me. Check that out. That's got to be a ski slope there, I would think. And I'm going to go ahead and creep up to 3,500 feet because we're going to need to be getting a little bit higher. And we'll kind of take our time getting up there. I'll go at 500 feet a minute. Aside from being a quaint little town, Hokksund is also the location of Norway's first glassware factory, Notodden Glassverk. And today they have a museum down there where you can watch them blow glass the old-fashioned way, back when you didn't need a little crack rock stuffed in the end of it to have a good time. That looks just great down there, doesn't it? Really, really nice. There's our little bridge. And they've also got a church down there that still has a few elements dating all the way back to, I mean, it was burned down probably several times. They rebuilt it several times, but portions of it I read are from 1152. And it's too small to really spot from up here. But I'll show you where it is on the satellite map if you're curious, if you're heading out here in real life. So I think this is that grass strip, because there's the main road coming through town, and there's a little grass strip. So if you want to take a little pit stop, if you're flying this yourself, there's where you could do it. And there aren't many other airports between here and our destination, so that's probably your last hopping off point if you need to take a whiz or something. Just gorgeous. There's other parts of the world that they've updated with super detailed terrain that I have not had this issue with performance on, so I don't know what the heck they did out here. But I heard that they made the resolution down to 1 meter, so that's pretty fine. The last time I got a 1 meter resolution add-on pack was with the Canary Islands, and that thing was like 20 gigabytes. It was enormous. Alright, we're going to head down this little river to our left here, which cuts through the town of Vestfossen, a historic little industrial town that's got its start in the lumber industry in the 1500s when they built a big sawmill powered by the river down here. And the place where the guy lived who built that is a museum now, and I'm not sure where exactly it is, but it wouldn't look any different than the rest of these structures. And I tried to spot where they built the sawmill, and I don't know if anything still exists of that, because I couldn't see any museum markers or anything. But there's kind of the downtown area there for that, so it was probably somewhere down here, I'm guessing. Today the town calls itself the capital of culture. What that means precisely, I couldn't determine, but it's a great way to attract tourists. Maybe our local man on the ground can help us out with that. And before we get to our next stop, which is Kongsberg and the current residence of the member who sent this flight to me, I'll tell you a bit about the climate out here. The closest location I could get data on was back in Oslo, so I'm going to assume we'll be in the ballpark for this region too, with everything being a little bit cooler and drier once we get up in the mountains a bit. But as I mentioned earlier, being at such a high latitude, you get a lot of sun during the summer months up here and a lot less of it during the winter. And during July, the sun rises at 4 a.m. and sets at nearly 11 p.m., reaching an average high temperature of roughly 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds wonderfully comfortable. And on the other end of the spectrum, in January, you'll see the sun a little after 9 a.m. and can watch it set around 3:30 p.m. And again, it doesn't get very high in the sky, with our average high temp in the winter just barely tickling the freezing mark, just a little bit below it. Pretty chilly. All right, here we are at the town of Kongsberg, and those ski slopes up ahead to our right over here, belong to the Ski Moor Kongsberg complex, and we'll get right up on it before we turn south. But this town was built on the mining industry, starting with copper in the 1400s and then silver in the 1600s, which made it explode in population leading up to and through its incorporation in 1624. But at its maximum output in the early 1700s, this town's mining operations represented 10% of the Norwegian GDP, which is one heck of a lot of mining. And what I found particularly interesting about that is that the initial mining crews were Germans, because I guess they had a lot of experience in that realm. And by 1623, almost half of the over 3,000 workers in the mines were German. But that wasn't an age of trains and telephones and big passenger ships. It was the early 1600s. So it's not like Germany's right next door. I imagine it would have been quite a haul to get up here back then. But I bet you can get a good schnitzel down there. By the 1770s, the mines employed roughly 4,000 workers. Never mind all the personnel it would take to run the town supporting it all. And the population grew so large that this town became the second largest in the whole country and was almost designated the capital. But nowadays the city's known for its high-tech weapons facilities, which is what this place is right here, which got started all the way back in 1814, and I wouldn't be surprised if that had something to do with the evolution of the technology used in the mines. And today the Kongsberg Group, in conjunction with Raytheon, the U.S. company, produces the NASAMS air defense system, which are mobile missile batteries that, according to what I could find out about them, are pretty good at shooting down just about anything that's not hypersonic. And they don't just shoot SAM missiles either. They can be loaded up with Sidewinders and a whole bunch of other stuff too, which is awesome. What a beautiful town. What a nice place to live. And at the southern end of town up here is a big dam, a waterfall, and 3 museums. And if I was understanding the website information correctly, they got a forestry museum, one for the hydroelectric station, and another one for roads, whatever that entails. But the star of that show is the waterfall, which doesn't look like much in the sim, but you can see some incredible drone footage on it on ToB Creations YouTube channel, which again I'll link down in the descriptions for this flight. It's beautiful. It's not like the kind that here it is right here. So you can see the water elevation changes and it kind of runs down. It's not like a drop-off waterfall. It runs down some rocks and stuff. Just absolutely beautiful. And on the satellite map, I'll show you the little piping for the hydroelectric plant that's over off to the side. So I'm trying to see, is that... I know they got a bridge down there, and I think the dam's actually on this side of it, which doesn't look like it modeled in the sim. And the waterfall really doesn't look anything like that. It's cascading over a bunch of rocks all the way down there. But it looks nice. Alright, here we go up in the mountains. I'm going to go ahead and just give it as much throttle as it can handle, and we got to get up to 5,500 feet, so let's dial that up. And we're not in a big rush to get out there, or get up there to that altitude, so we'll kind of take our time with that. Alright, can I safely look around without too much stuttering? Yeah, it's gotten better, that's for sure. Alright, whew. Let's go ahead and get our landing lights off. Looks like that turned all the lights off. That's interesting. Well, when you turn the landing lights on, it turns on all the lights. Or maybe it's just reflecting off the wings. Okay, well, whatever. So as you're probably already aware, Norway is the westernmost of 3 countries that make up Scandinavia, with Denmark to the south across the North Sea and Sweden along its eastern border. And up at the very north, it also shares a border with Finland and Russia. And the earliest traces of human habitation date back to around the time of those rock carvings back in Drammen, which is between 9,000 and 6,000 BC. But perhaps the most historically renowned people to live in Norway are, of course, the Vikings, who were most prevalent from around 800 to 1000 AD, which they call the Viking Age. And along with being ferocious warriors, conquering everything they could set their minds to, they were also astonishingly skilled seafarers, discovering not just Iceland. And when they discovered Iceland, I read they were actually looking for the Faroe Islands and managed to make it over to Iceland, but that's nothing compared to Newfoundland, which they also discovered, and that's about 2,000 miles across some of the most treacherous seas in the world. And they didn't do it in big ships. I mean, they were in those little Viking ships, those longboats. That is pretty incredible. I'm sure they did a stopover somewhere in Greenland on the way over there. But to get over there and then get back, that's just unbelievable. 1,000 years ago they were doing that. And as the Viking Age came to a close, the monarchy was established and Catholicism swept across the land, and by 1300, 70% of the land out here had transferred from private ownership to the church and crown. And around that same time period, Norway was caught up in the Black Death, ravaging most of the rest of Europe, which killed off a third of the population. And the lingering productivity aftershocks cut the remaining population in 1400 to just half of what it was 100 years prior. And I read one place that said it was 60% of what it was 100 years before. That is brutal. All right, I want to make sure when we flatten out that we don't start overspeeding, so I guess the wind noise is already pretty loud, so I'm not going to use that as a gauge. Another interesting thing about this plane, which I mentioned on the West Virginia flight, it doesn't track precisely along the line. It'll kind of weave back and forth. See, it's doing it right now. I mean, it tracks it, but not directly on it, which is interesting because I can't think of any other planes that do that. So as the population out here attempted to emerge from the rubble of the plague, a dynastic union between Norway and Denmark emerged that would last until 1814, after which they embraced a constitutional government based on the fledgling model of the new United States. And then during the First World War, Norway did its best to remain neutral, but a few naval attacks from Germany on some of their ships changed their sentiments just a bit in that regard. And they tried to take the same tack again in World War II until the Germans decided they would invade in 1940. And the Norwegians managed to fend them off for about 2 months until the formerly supportive Brits had to divert resources down to France, leaving the country to Nazi occupation until its liberation in May of 1945. In a little bit more recent history, you may recall Norway was the location of 2 terrorist attacks by that wacko Anders Breivik in 2011. He wound up killing almost 80 people by first detonating a truck bomb, I think it was in Oslo, and then attacking that youth camp out on the island of Utøya. Perhaps the only redeeming quality about that guy, I saw another picture of him when I was researching that, was that he was incredibly good looking, along with pretty much every other Norwegian I've ever seen. I had a friend in high school who was an exchange student my junior year, and his first name was Tom, and I cannot remember for the life of me his last name. We just called him Tom from Norway. But just a great, great guy. Really left a good mark in my impression of Norway, and incredibly good looking. The only thing that could have been better than getting Tom would have been getting a nice Norwegian gal out there. That looks real nice down there, doesn't it? Aside from the barren mountains off in the distance, which is just an artifact of having that train level of detail, having to be set so low. So jumping back to Oslo real quick before we get back to World War II, as you may or may not know, the city is the location where the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded each year, with the prizes for physics, chemistry, medicine, and literature being awarded in Stockholm, Sweden, per the wishes of Mr. Nobel himself, as stipulated in his will. And considering Nobel was Swedish, no one's really sure why he wanted the Peace Prize to be awarded in Norway, though some speculate he may have felt it to be a less militaristic country than his home turf of Sweden. And the question as to why he even chose peace as a category is also up for debate, but many believe it may have something to do with his repentance for self-imposed repentance for his invention of things like dynamite and other instruments of destruction during his lifetime. And I'm pretty sure that all the money they dispersed for that thing is part of the money that he left behind. So someone's done a good job investing that. All right, this long, skinny body of water up ahead is called Lake 10, and is not only one of the largest in Norway, but also one of the deepest in all of Europe, going down over 1,500 feet in some spots. And even at that depth, it's only the 3rd deepest in the country. Good, I'm just trying to watch the throttle here. In 1944, during the German occupation, members of the Norwegian resistance sank a ferry out on this lake called the SF Hydro, which was being used to transport heavy water back to Germany. And I'll tell you more about that in just a few minutes. But scientists found the wreck at the bottom of the lake in 1993, and in 2004 they managed to recover some samples of their clandestine cargo, confirming the Nazi progress with deuterium enrichment. And as if that's not cool enough, they also discovered a new fish species related to the Arctic char while they were down there. And I think they even managed to bring one back up to the surface. It's a small little guy, about 6 inches long, kind of translucent looking. I don't know if it survived the trip back up, but they gave it a shot. All right, so we're going to wind over here and then come across a valley over this way, wrap around the side of this mountain. I'm going to show you some more cool stuff. We still got all kinds of cool stuff to talk about. And when we come into this valley, there are going to be a lot of little towns down in it, and I couldn't tell where one started and another began, but they all had place names all over them, so I'll just say there are a lot of them down there. None of which I could pronounce. I couldn't figure out how to say the name of the river running through the valley either, so we'll just leave that alone. And you know the tough thing about all that is there are lots of letters that are used in the Norwegian alphabet that are not part of the English alphabet, or if they are, they have lots of little symbols on or around them. And since there's no way to type them correctly with an English keyboard, I couldn't even search for the pronunciation unless the word was all standard English letters, and some of them were, but a lot of them were not. And our local guide mentioned the town of Rjukan, R-J-U-K-A-N. I'm probably also not saying that correctly, so that must be one of the bigger ones down here. And this big mountain over here to our left is called Gaustatoppen, reaching a height of 6,177 feet. And obviously being the tallest thing around here, they say you can see roughly 1/6 of Norway from the top of that. And heck, we're almost that tall right now, so that's probably what 1/6 of Norway looks like. And it's a popular spot for adventurous skiers aboard with the enormous Gaustas ski complex, which is just to the east, which we'll see. It's on the other side of this mountain. We'll see all their slopes when we come around here. And during the warmer months, that mountain is the site of the Norseman Triathlon, heralded as the world's most brutal Ironman distance race. And I read that the finish line for that thing is at the very peak of the mountain, which sounds miserable. And I'm probably qualified to say that because I used to do triathlons. But I did them in Florida. I think the highest mountain I ever went up was probably a couple hundred feet. And there's also a plane wreck somewhere on the side of it that was deemed too difficult to clean up. And I tried to get some more information about that, but couldn't find anything. And running down inside of it, there's something called a funicular railway, which is one of those that has two opposing cars that kind of act as counterbalances for each other. And that was built by the military, with a lot of help from the U.S. due to it being so close to Russia, in the 1950s. To get people up to a radio relay station they built up there at the top. So getting back to the town of Rjukan for a minute, which is going to be down this valley, you may notice it looks a little bit dark down there, and if it was actually November, it would be completely dark down there. That valley floor does not get any sunlight between September and March due to the low angle of the sun, and you can see those are some steep cliffs on the side of that thing. Look at that. Man. Well, in 2013, they built something called the Sun Mirror. It was like an art project or something, which consists of a bunch of mirrors up on the side of the mountain that reflect sunlight down into the town square for a few minutes each day during the wintertime. And apparently it was not a cheap undertaking either. It cost several $1 million. Look at that. That looks gorgeous, doesn't it? Alright, so there's all those ski slopes. And I'm guessing that little switch back there is probably a road to get up there. And boy, I bet they got some fast water coming down that thing, huh? I think in real life there's a waterfall somewhere around here, so it probably doesn't look like that, really. But I think I remember seeing a little marker for a waterfall over here. And there's some slopes that I think are a part of this complex that also come over here. But I was looking for anything that looked kind of open on the satellite map at the end, and I only saw 1 or 2 little spots coming down here, so I don't think they have a lot of slopes over there, but you can get over there if you want to try to ski that. Okay, so back to the history. In 1906, they started mining saltpeter out here for fertilizer, but they needed a lot of electricity to do it. So they built the Vemork hydroelectric plant in 1907, which we'll see in just a second, which when it opened in 1911 was the world's largest hydro plant at the time. And in 1934, they built a hydrogen plant next to the power station that used electrolysis to create the hydrogen. And it turns out that one byproduct of that process is heavy water, which is a form of water where the hydrogen atoms are all deuterium, which it turns out comes in very handy when trying to create an atomic bomb. So when the Norwegians figured out the Germans were using it for just that purpose, they sank that ferry back in Lake Ten, which was carrying it back to Germany, and sabotaged this factory up here. And when the Allies found out about it, they started bombing this facility out here too. And this is an in-sim point of interest and add-on, so it is going to look just fantastic. We're about to come around the side of it here. And if you're traveling out here someday, you can stop and check it out for yourself because they built a big museum down there that tells the whole story. All right, so here's the waterway pipelines coming down from the top part of the facility, which is up here. And then I think down here is where the big museum is. It's going to look just wonderful. Look at that place. Oh, they got a bridge going there too. Look at that thing. Look, that looks really deep. I wonder if it's really that deep in real life. Oh, but the bottom of the bridge doesn't look great. Or maybe it does. Maybe it's just a shadow down there. That looks alright. That's good. Look at that thing. Awesome. And if you've ever seen the 1965 movie The Heroes of Telemark, starring Kirk Douglas, you probably already know a good bit of that story because it was based on all the stuff that was going on out here. And almost all of it was filmed on location, too. I think they filmed the ferry scene somewhere else, but all the stuff around the power plant and the hydrogen plant was filmed on location. Alright, now we're going to head south on our way over to our destination at Notodden. So my plan is just to cut right across the tops of these mountains until we can descend into a valley about 15 miles east of the airport. We'll take that valley all the way in, which is going to be beautiful. Just soak in the sights. But there's not a lot, much more to see other than this beautiful landscape between here and there, so I'll see what kind of tunes I can scrounge up that will fit the setting as we head down there. Take a little intermission. And feel free to skip ahead for a few minutes if you like, but don't miss the end because the airport and approach is just beautiful. And as always, we'll pull over a little NavMap when we're done to check everything out from the satellite view. And I definitely want to remember to show you that fort down in the Oslo fjord. That thing's pretty cool. And those waterfalls and stuff back in the town where our member's from. Alright, so let me see what I can queue up here. Enjoy the next few minutes of beautiful scenery. All right, here we are in our beautiful valley. And as we come in, we're going to head over a little town called Heddal. And the river, or maybe a creek is a better word for this little guy running through here, is called Hedola. And I'm probably not saying that right because it has a funny letter O involved in the spelling. It's one of those that looks like a no smoking sign with a little line through it. So I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But as we approach the airport, you're going to see a huge lake at the end of the runway. And at almost a right angle to the end of the airport, across the lake to the left, is the actual town of Notodden, and running through that town is the Tenelva River, which if we followed it directly north would take us back to Lake Ten, just to kind of orient you with this square that we've drawn for ourselves here. And Kongsberg would be back off to the right of that river if we were taking it back north. So that's where we are spatially. And this airport has a really nice add-on available at Orbix, but it was like $13 US, and even though it is a beautiful area, I don't think I'd be flying out here frequently enough to justify buying it. But look at this little approach. Wonderful. And notice there's been no popping in and out with shadows on the mountains. A little bit of scenery popping, but compared to the Alps, not too shabby at all. And the airport is at about 50 feet above sea level, so we can come way, way, way down here. In fact, I'm going to come down a little bit faster just to make sure we get down fast enough. So we're going to come around here, the lake will be out here, and then our runway, you'll see it going right into the lake over there. And the last thing we're going to try to spot as we come in is the Heddal Stave Church, which is also an in-sim point of interest. And you've got to check out some pictures of that place online. It was built around 1200 and looks absolutely incredible. And it's one of only 28 surviving stave churches in Norway, and it's the biggest of all of them. And if you're wondering what makes something a stave church, well, I didn't know either, so I had to look at that. It's a reference to the construction style, which, if you think about Stonehenge, it's kind of like that, where the heavy horizontal stuff is placed on big, strong, heavy vertical supports, which in Norwegian apparently are called staves, the supports are. Which I think might also be a reference to the type of wood used, because I bought some pipe tobacco once that had a little charred piece of a barrel, a bourbon barrel, that they called a stave too. So maybe I need to look into that a little bit more. And this thing looks about as Viking as you could possibly imagine, though it was built after those guys were gone. But when I think of what Viking architecture would look like, that's it. And the problem we're going to have, unfortunately, is that we have to fly directly over it because it is perfectly aligned with our runway and just a mile from the end of it. But we'll see if we can pitch the nose down enough to spot it once we get out there. And as we come in here, there's just a few things I need to get off my chest that will be a surprise to no one. I just saw John Beckett's review of the Vulcan this week, and that thing is just absolutely incredible. Just as good looking as I think everyone was hoping it would be. Just the complications in getting it started gave me a watery mouth. I'll keep this G-rated for all our sensitive viewers. And the interior detailing on that thing, good grief. Some of the best I've ever seen. The only thing I didn't like about it was that I couldn't conceive of anything we could do with it on this channel. But I'm definitely open to any ideas if someone can come up with something we could do. And secondly, I didn't realize that they had redone the SR-22 until I saw a review by 737NG driver, who I think has added A300NG driver to his title now that he's flying those. But that thing is incredible now. Absolutely incredible. It's a freeware plane. It's a default plane in the sim. And it's just amazing. So maybe we'll try to take that thing out, maybe even on our next flight, because it was awesome. And as a bonus update, I've broken down and purchased myself an early Christmas gift and finally got a full hardware loadout for helicopters. And I went all the way. I got it all from Virpil. I've tried flying those things with the yoke, but and I don't have a stick at all, so I got the collective, the little end of the collective, and then an actual flight stick, because I don't have one of those, and a lot of these planes have sticks, like this one. So that'll be cool to have that, but all that stuff is on back order. It won't be here till after the holidays, but that's something we can look forward to. There's a lot of spots in the cities where I just wanted to be able to take it a little bit slower than we can in the planes, and I'll be able to do that. All right, let's get the landing lights back on and the gears down. There's our runway directly ahead of us right over here, and we'll see if we can spot that stave church. See if anything looks like it out here. And I think we'd probably be able to tell if they did do it up because it is very distinctive looking. All right, autopilot off. Go ahead and give it one notch of flaps. All right, so once we get lined up with the runway, it's going to be right between us and the runway. And there's another bigger building just, it'll be to the right of it, the way we're flying in. So I think that's probably the bigger building there, and it's like right over here. Although those look like trees. That's not it, because it doesn't look like that unless I didn't model it correctly. All right, another notch of flaps. And I'm not seeing anything. It's really pointy looking. Oh man, I'm not seeing anything that looks like it. It's got to be out here. I think we're directly over it right now. Well, shoot. Nope, not over there. Well, I'll show you where it is on the satellite map so you can check it out if you'd like. All right, let's give it full flaps. Yeah, if you fly around here a lot, check out the Addons for this airport. It looked really, really good, and this is obviously a beautiful area. My only gripe are the performance issues I was having, because I usually don't have those. I like to keep my graphics turned way, way up, just so that everything looks really as good as we can get it. And if you didn't already know it, I record all these in 4K, so if your computer can handle it, go ahead and change your graphics settings for YouTube. Watch these in all their full glory. All right, we're going to stall out. Hopefully not. Let's give it a little bit of juice. And then we'll just pull over here to the left, check out a little NavMap, and then it'll be in the bag. All right, get ready. It's going to be loud again. All right, flaps up. And let's see if we can find a taxiway over here. Everything looks pretty snowed in. Hopefully it's not going to make me go to the end of the runway, because I'm not going to go all the way to the runway. We'll just cut across the grass. Oh, is that some... No, those look like runway lights. And we're going to pull over there anyway. Norwegians are nice. They won't mind if we do this. If we had a little snowplow in the front, we could clear our own taxiway. Alright, we'll just park right here. What a beautiful area. Beautiful, beautiful area. Okay. Alright, parking brake on. And we got to move this little detent pin in to shut it off. I'm going to cut the engines off, fuel pump off, and that's going to stay on. Okay, whatever. All right, let's open the canopy too. Why not? All right, let's see what we got going on around here. Turn our centering off. All right, so here's where we are in Norway. Here's Denmark down here. Here's Sweden up here. Finland's over here. Of course, there's the UK, France, Spain, all that stuff down there. So Germany's right around here. That was a pretty good hike for those guys to come all the way across, because it borders Denmark. But I don't know, maybe it wasn't that bad when they were going up to that mining town. A lot of German influence out here. All right, so here's where we took off from at Kjeller. And I think those J's are pronounced kind of like, think of like fjord, almost like a Y sound in English. And if you want to check out those bridges on the Glomma River, this is where they are. We just weren't quite the right attitude to spot those. But my original flight came out a little bit further. We got a nice look at them, and they do look just beautiful. And here's that little ski complex that we saw. And here's our radar dome out here. I didn't put a bookmark on it, but you can spot it on a little NavMap or any other satellite image. And in Google, there's actually a little marker on there. And here's where the airport is in relation to that, the big airport. That's about 15 miles from there to there. So it's a good ways outside of town. But they got another radar that they use up there as well. All right, and here's Oslo. Looks a lot different now without the snow, doesn't it? And you'll see why we had trouble spotting these places, because almost all of them have white roofs. So there's the Intility Arena. And it looks weird, like you might not pronounce it that way. They got a lot of museums out here. Here's their Natural History Museum, very hard to spot amongst everything else down there. And here's the Opera House, and you can see why we couldn't see that, but we could see this spectrum here. So if you look for that, then look for the train station. If you're flying maybe from this side, you should be able to spot that. It's kind of got a neat looking roof on it. But here's that big fortress. Akershus Fortress. Look at this place. Looks really, really great. And they said whoever conquered the fortress conquered Norway. And it was never conquered, although I guess at least not until World War II. And there's where the Prime Minister has a residence now. And here's their Parliament building, which again would have been very hard to spot from up there. This is their National Theater right here. Here's where the City Hall is, called the Rådhuset. And then there's the Royal Palace, which you can, though the monarchy still lives there, I read that you can do tours in there as well. And they got another museum, I think, over here. And then here's Frogner Park out here. So this is where the manor house was for the aristocrats and wealthy folks that were living there. And I think the first person to build that up was a guy that was in the timber business before the crown took it back over. But without the snow on the ground, you can see all these details in the park. It looks really, really nice. And then here's that little peninsula with all of the ship museums. And this one is the one that has the Viking ships in it, but I read that that's closed until 2025, so they must be doing some refurbishments or something in that place. And then here's where the Kon-Tiki Museum is. I think it's this one right here. And then this is where that Arctic ship was in here from the 1800s, which I don't think they have the whole ship built out in there. I think they just have the interior, which from the pictures I saw looked really cool. And if you happen to look down over here when you're flying over, you'll notice two big squares just kind of sitting here in the middle of this, and that's these two buildings right here. None of the harbors here rendered, despite me having that add-on pack, which is supposed to fix that. It didn't in this area for some reason. So if you see those and you're wondering what the heck are those two big squares there, that's what they are. And the cruise ship was in port in the sim, so you can spot that too if you like. And then here's that other arena. And there's even an IKEA out here, which originally I bookmarked, but then I took it off because like, no, that's stupid. I think this might be the IKEA out here. Sometimes those look really good in the sim for some reason. All right, let's look at this big fort down here. This is the one that sank the German ship. Look at that place. And I might have to take a flight out there just to see how good that looks. It wasn't, I don't think it was marked as a POI, but maybe it was. I don't recall. And boy, they got a lot more than 3 guns down there. So I don't know where the big 11 inchers were that sank that ship. And of course, you can't see the torpedo tubes because those were under the waterline. But they had 2 forts that helped it out. There's a little battery right down here, which you can't see anything of that, if anything still exists. And then there was another one on this side, and I can't recall exactly where that is. Maybe somewhere in this vicinity. But I couldn't really see anything of that either, but you can find the Google place markers for those if you want to check it out. And then here's Drammen over here, and from the air and the satellite, you can definitely see all the cars they got parked there. Look at that. So that's one of the import areas there for all the automobiles, and then here's the other one over here. Look at all these things. But originally that was all timber, doing timber trade out of there. And the spot that I found with the little exposed rock with the carvings on it was somewhere down in this area, but there's a few different sites around town here. And again, you got to check out a picture of that on the ground. It's just crazy. It's not in a museum. It's not in like a covered thing. It's just in like a little park with a little fence around it. Really wild. 6,000 years old that stuff is. And there's what I thought might be another ski area, which it looks a lot like that from here, doesn't it? Just without any snow on it. I didn't look to see what that was. And then we came out here to old Hokksund, and there's that airfield, which again is grass, but it's, what, 2,200 feet long? It's right next to that road right there if you're trying to spot it, and I did include the add-on for that in the description as well. And then here's that old church from 1152, and I think just this tower part of it is what still had the oldest pieces of it still in there. And then we flew down to our member's hometown, where he's still residing today, and there was that big ski slope that we saw over there. This is Kongsberg. And there is the big aerospace facility right there. And they got a big go-kart track out here, which I think you can probably see without the snow on the ground, but that is a big complex. Look at that. They got a little mine there too. They're still pulling silver out of there. And here's the waterfall down here. And you can see that looks nothing like it did in the sim, but you got to check out the video if you're into things like that on ToB Creations site, which again, I will link for this, but he has a great drone flight over this with some nice music in the background, just wonderful. But they got these hydroelectric pipes running down through here, a couple museums. And let's see. Okay, so here's the dam. And yeah, that didn't look right in the sim. All we could see was this road coming across here, but I didn't see anything that looked like that dam, but we were kind of far away, so maybe it looks a little better. But this definitely did not look like that, which I understand. That's got to be hard to model something like that. All right, so then we came out here, started heading out towards the mountains, and there's a lake I was trying to look for the name for, but I couldn't find it. And then here's Lake 10, which is where that ferry was sank, and I think even some civilians died in that as well. And I'm sure, I guess they figured that was worth the price to pay for that. And here's another lake that I wanted to find the name for, but I couldn't because it was up on the top of the mountain, which looked really cool. And here's that big ski resort, Gausta Ski Complex. And look at all these slopes they got going out here. And over here is the big mountain. And I was trying to see, that's got to be the little radio mast that they built up there in the 1950s. And the train is running down through the mountain, so I don't know where that thing spits itself out. But as far as looking for ski slopes, maybe that, I don't know. Maybe they got a lift running up here or something. But then you'd think the slopes would go back down to it. So not seeing it in the wintertime, I don't know. And obviously this satellite image was taken sometime during the summer months because you can see the valley floor. And I tried to spot where those mirrors might be. Couldn't find anything in Google. Couldn't see anything up here. So I don't know where exactly those are. It looks a little stretched out, doesn't it? But they got them pointing a little bit of sunlight down there during the winter months, September to March, with no sunlight. Good grief. And I'm sure there's a sky glow, but man. All right, and here's the Vemork power plant, where the Germans were doing those nasty heavy water things, which I'm sure the Americans just wanted to get their hands all over. And that looked just perfect in the sim. Looked exactly like that. Just beautiful. And here's where we had our little intermission as we came over to our valley, which was a wonderful flight inbound to our airport. Came over that little lake there. And let me show you where the Stave Church is, and we can try to see why we couldn't spot it, if it was even down there. I mean, we flew right next to it. I think that's the big thing we saw off to the right. And I mean, that is a big building. And if it is a point of interest add-on, you would think that it would have been more easy to spot. So I don't know. If you have spotted it, let me know in the comments, because I'd like to fly out there and try to check it out again, because it is amazing looking. Yeah, that just does it no justice right there. That's terrible. Okay, and then here's the airport we came in. So this is the big town where the airport is, Notodden, and then there's that river that runs all the way back up to Lake 10, winding through there. So that's it. Wonderful, wonderful flight. Thank you so much, ToB Creations, for giving me all that information, for drawing out the flight plan. Just absolutely awesome. Had a total blast as always. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.